Right now, we are watching the most dangerous and explosive conflict on the planet, a direct collision between the United States and Iran. On one side, you have the world's most heavily funded military apparatus. On the other, the Middle East's most aggressive and deeply entrenched regional power. This spike in global crude oil prices shows the immediate fallout. Markets have shattered previous historical ceilings as the world faces the highest risk of a third global conflict in 80 years. This current phase of combat represents the explosive convergence of a chronological timeline that began over 40 years ago. Predicting the scale of the coming fallout requires looking at the specific pivot points that turned a decades-long rivalry into a frontline battle. For 4 decades, Washington and Tehran fought in the shadows. It was a standoff defined by proxy battles, intense rhetoric, and deep political friction. That era of shadow warfare ended in 2026, when a coordinated wave of high-level airstrikes hit targets deep inside Iranian territory. The United States did not act alone in this operation. The strikes were executed with direct participation from Israel. The primary objective was surgical, the elimination of Iran's top military commanders. In addition to those assassinations, the strikes targeted the physical infrastructure of Iran's military command and control. Iran retaliated almost immediately. Under the cover of night, they launched a massive wave of ballistic missiles and military drones. Those weapons bypassed regional proxies and flew straight toward U.S. military bases scattered across the Middle East. The missile exchanges ended the 40-year reliance on proxy forces, pulling both militaries into direct kinetic engagement. Following the initial aerial exchanges, the geography of the conflict shifted. The skies cleared, and a brutal maritime standoff began. The United States deployed its naval superiority to enforce a strict blockade, aiming to halt the flow of Iranian exports. This satellite image shows the Strait of Hormuz. Here, Iran positioned its counterplay. This narrow waterway acts as the primary bottleneck for 1/5 of the planet's daily oil supply. To challenge the blockade, Iranian forces began intercepting and capturing commercial ships navigating the channel. By actively weaponizing this specific oceanic choke point, the two nations effectively suspended the normal flow of the global economy. That brings the timeline to the present, a highly complex and fragile temporary ceasefire. To pull both sides back from the brink, Pakistan has stepped in. Diplomats in Islamabad are currently mediating direct peace negotiations, but the talks are deadlocked. Washington refuses to lift the naval blockade until conditions are met. Meanwhile, Tehran rejects the idea that the blockade is just a negotiating tactic. They view it as an active state of war, making it impossible to sign any peace agreement. While the diplomats argue, the consequences are expanding. Supply chains are fraying, and the standoff is actively destabilizing domestic economies across Europe and Asia. Peace remains elusive because the physical assets of the conflict, the naval blockade and the seized tankers, remain active, continuing to drain regional economies. So how does 4 decades of escalating hostility actually end? The data suggests 3 diverging paths. Either the violence reignites, or the current temporary ceasefire stabilizes into a permanent binding peace. But there is a third path. The localized conflict pulls neighboring countries into a larger multi-nation regional war. With global oil markets unable to sustain a multi-year blockade of the strait, and military analysts projecting a stalemate on the ground, a negotiated settlement remains the only outcome that prevents total economic collapse. We have seen the 40-year chain of events leading right to this moment. Based on that history, which of these 3 futures do you think is actually coming next?